Hello, everyone. I am Tom. I am a lecturer and data scientist at UC Berkeley. This is joint work with my colleague Pratik Sachdeva, and part of my ongoing quest to sneak the word asshole into my presentations. I'll be this year's inevitable academic with a Reddit data set, so bear with me. This one's about moral dilemmas in r/am I the asshole. So, here is a moral dilemma. Someone's sister has social anxiety and asks them to go into a store and buy Plan B for her. The main person refuses. They tell their sister she needs to face her fears. And the sister then gets upset. Now imagine you have 4 buttons in front of you to judge the author of this story. You're the asshole, meaning, they're the asshole. Not the asshole, meaning the sister is the asshole. Everyone sucks here in this scenario. Or there are no assholes in this scenario. I don't know which button you would press, but we asked this question to a bunch of large language models to see how they answer and the motives they give for that answer. Spoiler alert, they do not agree. So why are we studying moral judgment in language models? Well, people are already using them in all kinds of personal and emotionally charged situations. Some even turn to models for therapy or advice or emotional support. And that raises, I think, real stakes about the kinds of norms that are embedded in these systems when they respond particularly to valuable or to vulnerable users. Now, that type of usage is also complicated by the fact that companies are incentivized, as you see here, to steer LLM behavior to increase engagement. If you remember this spring, GPT-4o started behaving unusually nice, even in response to obviously bad ideas. This was a news event. At the same time, we're seeing evidence that LLMs are getting better at persuasion. So the question becomes, what values are these systems persuading us towards when we interact with them? And there's a few ways in which this has been studied. Some studies have prompted models with political or moral surveys. Others have given them constrained moral scenarios like trolley problems and such. And other studies have evaluated LLMs on social tasks like predicting who gets a loan or who gets a college spot or things like that. What tends to be missing across those approaches is the kind of everyday and unstructured moral reasoning that we're seeing in real-world interactions, like personal dilemmas or mental health chats and so on. And it's that kind of messy moral data that we were interested in exploring. So to see how models handle real-world moral ambiguity, we turned to a Reddit community called r/am I the asshole, where people post these everyday moral conflicts and ask others to judge them. And these dilemmas are messy, but they're structured. They have a common format. And they've got shared labels, like the ones I just showed you. That makes them a good space to test how models reason through these socially situated forms of moral judgment. So here's what we did. We sampled 10,000 posts, more or less, from Am I the Asshole that were out of distribution for the models we were evaluating. And the models then had to issue a verdict and a reasoning for that verdict. We tested 7 models, and we repeated this 3 times to test for consistency. So here's what that looks like in practice. We have here the dilemma I just spoke about, and then you see different models responding to that dilemma. So for instance, this is ancient history, right? GPT 3.5, GPT-4, Claude Haiku, Google Palm 2, Llama 2 7b, Mistral 7b, Gemma 7b. In this case, GPT-4 would say there are no assholes in this scenario. Claude says you're not the asshole. Gemma says everyone sucks, and so on. Now, these are pretty, normal disagreements for a morally ambiguous case, but they do raise questions like why do models pick the outcomes that they do, and how consistent are they, and how closely do they align with judgments on Reddit, which, of course, itself is not an unbiased viewpoint. So we evaluated, 10K dilemmas using these 7 LLMs, obtained the distribution. Here's not the asshole. Redditors gave that verdict in about 77% of the cases, and then certain models like Claude and Palm match that pretty closely. You good? No, all right. I don't want anyone to perish during my talk. Others, like Llama and Mistral, were rarely assigning this at all. And if we then look at all 5 judgment labels, we see these distinct moral profiles, where like GPT 3.5 and Llama are more likely to assign blame. And Mistral, for instance, frequently opts for not the asshole or everyone sucks here. Now, that analysis gives some clues that models don't agree on an aggregate level, but it doesn't speak to how they are behaving at the dilemma level. We measured, annotator agreement metrics, calculated Krippendorff's alpha to assess each pair of model agreement at the dilemma level, find that models exhibit low agreement. I'm going to go on here. So far we've only looked at a single verdict issued by each model, but these models may issue different verdicts on different runs. Right? So we were interested in how self-consistent are they, and we ran the dilemma evaluation multiple runs, 3 times. I know it could be higher, but what's interesting to see even with 3 runs is that models are more self-consistent than they are with each other. So GPT-4 and Claude specifically, and again, these are older models, they scored agreements of 0.89 and 0.85, as you can see here. Now we've replicated this analysis with more recent models, and they get more and more consistent as time goes on, evaluating this specific type of data. And now this question about intermodal agreement made us think a little bit about LLMs as an ensemble of actors that is issuing verdicts on a dilemma. And in that sense, they're a little bit akin to the Redditors in the comments that are also an ensemble of people who are issuing verdicts on the dilemma. So we assessed whether there is a correspondence between these ensembles. And to do that, we pulled the top 100 Redditor comments per post, and we extracted the verdict from each. And that gave us what we call a label rate. So for example, 0.5 here for not the asshole would mean that half of the commenters said, in this post, this person is not the asshole. Then we looked at how many models gave that same verdict per post, and you see here on the x-axis that when models start agreeing, so do Redditors. So there is some sense in which we can say that LLMs may be a proxy for human-aligned moral reasoning, or at least Redditor-aligned moral reasoning, right? I suppose they're almost human. So, until now we focused on what verdicts models render, but we also looked at why. So models gave explanations for their reasoning. I don't have time to get into this beautiful graph. Feel free to ask me about it later. We had 6 broad moral themes then classified by Yudkin et al. In a previous study on Am I the Asshole? And what we did is we wanted to see how model explanations map onto these categories. So, these are originally qualifying the dilemmas themselves, and we had the models, our models being evaluated by these categories as well in their explanation. So you see, for instance, that for fairness, how often does a model use a theme like fairness when explaining its verdict? And you see then that, models like GPT-4 show a pretty strong link where fairness seems to push them towards leniency and saying, no, you're not the asshole in this scenario. Others barely change. We did that for all the 6 categories here. So this is what we did, summarizing, evaluating LLMs on thousands of real-world moral dilemmas. Models often disagree. And ensemble agreement matches that of the Redditors. The bottom line for us here is that morality happens in everyday life, not just in surveys or in thought experiments. And I think what we did is sort of the first step, the sort of simplest thing one could do within the complexity of that reality. Thank you very much, and I look forward to fielding your questions.